Okay, so we're going to review for the quiz. So I'm actually going to group numbers 1 and 2 together, and we're going to start with number 2. So for number 2, it says identify the number of solutions for the following graphs. So anytime that we're talking about quadratics and we're saying the word solution, that's also the same thing as the zeros of the function and the x-intercept of the graph. So anytime that they're asking for solutions, zeros, or an x-intercept, they all mean the same thing. So basically, we're looking at these red parabolas and we're trying to see how often they cross the x-axis, which remember is the horizontal one. So this red parabola never crosses, touches, intersects with this x-axis. So this is the one that has no solution. When I do this x-axis, this one crosses the red parabola twice. So this one has 2. And when I look at the red parabola and this x-axis, it crosses 1 time because the vertex comes down, it touches that x-axis and then keeps going. So this is the one that has 1 solution. So now that we kind of see what they look like visually, let's go back up to number 1. And number 1 is very similar because it says identify the number of solutions each equation below has. And again, it's either none, 1, or 2. Remember, this unit is about quadratics. So quadratics are equations or functions that have that x squared in it. So whenever we see an x squared, we should automatically envision a parabola. It could be opening up like all 3 of these, or it can be opening down, kind of looking like a mountain. So for this one, we're thinking about what number or numbers can I put into x that when I square it, I get 25. Most of the time, we're going to have a positive and a negative side to this answer. So I could do 5 squared, which give me 25, but I could also do negative 5 squared, which will also give me 25. So this one has 2 answers because I could do 5 and negative 5. When I look at B, this can be a little confusing, so I need to kind of simplify it, and I would want it to look like this, where I have just an x squared by itself. So I'm going to solve this. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides so I can cancel this out. So I would get 2x squared equals, and the negative 3 plus 3 also cancels out. So this is a 0. Then I need to get rid of this 2. So I'm going to divide by 2, just like I would if this said 2x equals 0 back in algebra 1. So this is now equal to 1. So this is x squared equals, and 0 divided by 2 is 0. So now when I think about x squared, what number times itself is going to give me 0? The only answer for this one is 0. There is no positive 0 and negative 0. So this is the one that only has 1 solution. So anytime we get like an x squared equals 0, because 0 is the only number that doesn't have a positive and the negative of that number. All right, so then looking at C. Now this one isn't a quadratic. We should remember this one from algebra 1 is a linear. So its graph is only going to be a straight line, which means it's only going to have 1 answer, because we're thinking about where the parabolas crossed. We had maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe none. But if we just have a straight line, it eventually has to cross the x-axis. So that's going to be 1 because it's linear. This one, the same thing, I'm going to make it look like this x squared. So I'm going to add 15 to both sides. So I get 9x squared equals 16. I'm going to divide by 9, and I get x squared equals some random fraction, which is fine because I know whatever the answer is can have a positive and a negative because it's not 0. So this one's going to have 2 answers. And this question isn't looking specifically for what the answers are. So once we know it's not 0, which would have 1 answer, we're okay. Now, if this was a negative number, there's no way to multiply to get a negative answer. So like, let's say if it said negative 100. We can't multiply this to get negative 100 because if I had a positive 10 times a positive 10, I would get a positive 100. If I had a negative 10 times a negative 10, I would also get a positive 100. The only way to get a negative is to have a positive and a negative, and then that means I can't square it. I have to have 2 different numbers. So as long as my answers don't have a negative, which would mean that I have no solution, or it's not 0, which means I would have 1 solution, it means it's always going to have 2 solutions. So then for this one, the last one, E, it's actually already in factored form. So that makes it a lot easier because I'm just going to set each one up to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0. When I solve that, I get x equals negative 2. And then if I had x minus 2 equals 0, I would get x equals positive 2. So I have 2 different answers. So this one also has 2. The only time that this would happen that you would get one answer is if you had the exact same thing. So if they were both +2 or if they were both x minus 2, then we would get only one answer because no matter how many times I solve x plus 2 equals 0, I'm still only going to get -2 as my answer, which means I'm only going to have one solution. Right, so anytime it's in factored form and they both have the exact same problem, then that's when there would be one solution. Right, so that's problems 1 and 2.